And here we are live. Okay, here we are live for our first live streaming from foodlatest.com. We are in our office in Torino. I hope you can listen me and hear me well. I see people joining. That's very exciting because we had a great response on LinkedIn with just a couple of days notice. So let's give to everybody a couple of minutes to join, and then we'll start the discussion about this survey that we did on foodlatest.com about the 2021 trend in the food sector. Okay, we will see who get more, which kind of trend got more votes, and the strong points and the weak points, in my opinion, about those trends. Okay, I see people joining. So just a brief introduction. As you might know, I'm a food lawyer, and foodlatest.com is not just a blog, a website platform, but we are a consultancy firm made by lawyers, but also by technologists that gives integrated advice to food companies across the globe about labeling, food safety, and import-export requirement with a very specific approach and very peculiar approach that is a mix of law and science. Okay, let's start because I see that people are joining with our results of the survey. Okay, how it's working a live stream for those that are not used to this kind of experience. It's not a Zoom call. You cannot speak with me, but you can add comments in the chat. I can see your comments live, and I will pick up the most interesting comments and add my point of view if you have any curiosity or you want to ask anything. Okay, so please feel free to use the chat to communicate with me live. Let's start from the results of our survey then. In the last position, we find the personalized nutrition trend. Okay, it was one of the options that I proposed in the survey because I'm receiving a lot of advertising. I heard a lot about these personalized nutrition trends. I see articles, and I was quite surprised to see that nobody voted for the personalized nutrition trend. Because again, I'm receiving ads from Facebook, from Instagram all the time about those kind of services that basically are telling me, well, just send us some information about your blood group, about your DNA or your blood values and values in your blood through a specific testing, and we will give you the proper diet for you to be healthy, to be in shape, and so on. So there are a lot of those services around. I never work with any of those companies, so I cannot tell you very much about how they work from the inside. But for sure, I see many problems in doing efforts like this, because I don't think it's easy to persuade consumers to send to you a blood sample or a DNA sample to personalize a diet in a moment where consumers are very afraid about their privacy, their data, and all the rest. So of course, everybody wants to be fit and in shape, but I think it's a big step to think that those services might become mainstream in a short time frame. From a regulatory perspective, then we might face a lot of difficulties when we want to put in place services like those one about personalized nutrition. Because, for instance, I stumble in a couple of companies offering you personalized food supplements on the basis of your diet and needs and the samples that you send them. But imagine how it's already complex to get the authorization for food supplements across all Europe because we have not a common market there. We need an authorization in most of the member states, or at least a registration. Imagine if you have to register products that are personalized on each single client or subject or categories of clients. You multiply your burdens and you might have huge regulatory hurdles. Let's move to another topic. Since personalized nutrition was not a success, it was quite surprising to me to see the indoor farming with just 6% of the votes. because I think that indoor farming or vertical farming, but it should not be necessarily vertical, okay? Let's call it indoor farming. I think it's taking momentum. I see many initiatives in this field, and there are great plus for indoor farming. We have no use of pesticides or nearly no use of pesticides. We have less use of water that for sure will become a scarce resource in future. So the less water we waste, the better. And this is also strictly linked to the sustainability topic that we'll see later. And then you have a better control on your yields because you avoid certain variables like the weather conditions and to a certain extent also the aggression of pests to your greens and your products. So I think indoor farming might be interesting in future, and I see a lot of initiative both from small players and big companies in those fields. Okay, I foresee huge investment in indoor farming. Then we don't have to forget that we cannot exclude that in future we might have some catastrophic event or the climate will change, and so indoor farming will become much more than a trend. It will become a necessity. I don't want to be a catastrophist, okay, but still I'm fascinated by those kind of scenario, and we have to think that something unpleasant might happen, especially regarding climate change, and we have to be ready. So I'm still fascinated by innovation like indoor farming or going to Mars, where, for us common people, if our world as we know it will end one day. Against the mass adoption or the development of indoor farming, I see just basically an obstacle. It is the amount of energy that you consume to maintain those facilities where you produce the grains, indoor. Because there is a huge consumption of other kind of resources, basically energy. So you might produce this energy in a green way, of course, with the solar, with the sun, with the wind, with other resources. It will be more sustainable than fossil fuel, of course, but still there is a huge energy consumption. So if we think to a mass scale adoption of indoor farming, I think that the supply of energy, the cost of energy might be a challenge. So I would like to have more information. If you have it, you can send it via email or LinkedIn. I'll be happy to read it about those aspects, the balance between the saving of resources from one side and the energy consumption on the other side. From a regulatory perspective, I don't see particular problems. It's primary production, like in the fields. So it's basically already regulated from a food safety standpoint. The food is still food, is not changing also if it's growing indoors, so no issues. There is an interesting discussion today in most countries of the world about indoor farming and the chance to consider it as the food that is being produced with such technologies as organic. Why I say it's fascinating? Because I think that to a certain extent is embracing the spirit of the organic way of production, because you have no pesticides or less use of chemicals and other substances. But on the other side, you don't have the land, and a big part of the organic principles are based on land preservation and the better use of the land and the resources. So since you are not growing into a field, into the land, in most countries the tendency is to consider those kind of production as not organic and as a production that cannot be certified as organic. Let's move to another topic. We move now to a couple of topics that receive 8% of the preferences, both of them. One is regarding the immune boosting ingredients. And I'm not surprised to see immune boosting ingredients receiving some votes, because the attention to health in our consumers is increasing. There is more consciousness about the effects of bad nutrition and of the connection between nutrition and health. And of course, we had COVID-19 last year. So also, if those topic of COVID-19 has been exploited also by not exactly legitimate business to sell supplements, vitamins, and a lot of other products as a factor that might prevent COVID. We start to have some evidence, for instance, about the vitamin D that might help against the disease. And so I'm not surprised of the votes that I saw there. From a regulatory perspective, I don't see huge obstacles or problems linked to immune boosting ingredients, or nothing new, at least. We know that, for instance, Europe is a system that is quite close to innovation and new ingredients. So you might have authorization procedures that act as a barrier if you want to enter into this market. The cost in developing certain ingredients might be high, and sometimes the regulatory categorization is not exactly clear. Or if you think about new kind and new families of ingredients, but also new strains of probiotics or ingredients that we know, you might have problem in getting an approval or to get the right categorization. Okay, I see people joining. That's great news. Okay, we are 26 now, but growing. And let's move to the other topic with 8% of the preferences, that is e-commerce and delivery. Okay, not surprised also in this case to see some preferences, because with COVID-19, all the e-commerce services and the delivery services had a dramatic increase, a spike in the use of all the apps and the e-commerce means of purchasing food. So that's a factor that will keep going, I think, also in 2021. But also our lifestyle is favoring the expansion of those new way to buy and deliver food, because we have less time. We don't cook like in the past, especially in countries where the tradition is very strong, like Italy, France. Nobody has the time, to prepare dinner and lunch at home with fresh ingredients all the time. So there is for sure also a necessity of those new means of getting food at home. On the other side, all those companies sooner or later faced or will face some obstacles, like the issues linked to the treatment of the employees, or in some cases not employees. And that's exactly the point. They had labor issues in many countries, like Uber. This did not impede Uber to become a huge company and have a huge success, but still is a factor that shall be taken into account. It's a business model that is relying on agile work, and the regulations are very different from country to country, and they might find some obstacles on this side, and also encounter the criticism of the public that want, of course, food at home also if outside is raining or snowing, but still is sometimes care about the condition of work of those poor, guided, bicycle to your house. And I see also some weak spots from a regulatory perspective, because we don't have to forget that a delivery app is a food business. Is doing a distance selling of non-prepacked food. It doesn't matter if it's not managing directly the food in a production facility and is relying on restaurants for the preparation, but still we have transportation of food and delivery of food that is under their own responsibility. So in some countries, the regulatory status is not clear, but they need an authorization as food business operators, and they need to apply all the basic rules, at least in Europe, of our general food law regulation and hygiene package where applicable. Okay, so you cannot deliver the food in conditions that are not able to grant, the minimum food safety standards. And also in this area, we have not regulatory harmonization, for instance, on some details like the temperatures that shall be the temperature at which the food shall be kept along the along the delivery to your house. So I would pay a lot of attention to those details if I were in delivery company, or let's say digital business that are managing food, because too often I saw them reasoned just as digital companies, but they're not just digital companies. They are managing a product that is very, very sensitive like food, okay? Let's move to the fifth place where we have, and I think it's a surprise, sustainability with just 10% of the preferences. I'm a bit surprised by this because sustainability is I would say now it's a global driver of a lot of changes, not just a driver of progress, of innovation in food. Okay, this for several reasons. The consumers are evolving. The new generations are very aware of the problems that we have regarding the climate and environment. If you have kids like I have, it's incredible how the kids today at 10, 12 years old are much more aware of those issues and are much more inclined to, apply behaviors like recycling, everything, and they pay a lot of attention to environmental topics. And I do not feel that I was exactly the same when I was a kid. Okay, I was worried about a lot of other stuff, but not about the environment. So I, for sure, the investments on sustainability on a medium long term will pay very well, and I think each penny will be well spent today in sustainability. We might have a necessity to move towards a more sustainable food system, towards more sustainable food products, due to the climate change, of course. I'm not exactly, pro or against the climate change. I'm a guy that usually work with data, and I see that basically 90% of the scientists agree that we might have an impact on our planet if we continue to produce and consume like we are doing now. I also like history, so I acknowledge that we might be maybe in an era, in a period where we have also a global climate that is changing on its own, but surely our way of living is having an impact. So also if we don't have any catastrophe in future, in 20, 10 or 30 years, I don't know, for sure the things will change, the attention will be much more high to the environment. And so I think we have to embrace this trend today. If I were a CEO of a food company, I would put sustainability to the top of the list, no doubt about that. Also because I'm noticing an increasing regulation linked to, in a certain way, to sustainability. There are a lot of regulatory initiative popping out about animal welfare, about the single plastic items, about environmental labeling. So we have to put on the label the code of the material to allow the correct recycling, or we have to put a specific logo to grant that the product is recycled properly. So we are having increasing regulation. So if we don't embrace sustainability voluntarily, at a certain point we will be obliged by a lot of different regulations that are popping out around the world, and will be a cause of not harmonization on the labels, sadly, because this is the complexity that the companies will have to manage. Because also in Europe, where I'm not seeing an harmonized approach to environmental labeling or recycling labeling. Each country is moving on its own way. Of course, products that are sustainable are a bit more costly. We are living basically in an economic crisis from 2008 until now. The consumers have a limited income available, so on a short term, this might have an impact on sales, but again, on a long term, I think this will pay. This will pay very well. Now, let's see the first, the third position, because we have two trends that have the same amount of preferences, around or more or less the same. Let's say that we have a winner, but then we have three trends that have received mostly the same amount of votes until 10 minutes ago. So we have plant-based, transparency and trust, and digitalization and blockchain that are basically at the same level of preferences. Let's start from transparency and trust. Okay, I think that transparency and trust is well suited to stay in this second, third position because it's something that consumers are asking to the companies to be transparent, to give more information about origin, about how the food is produced, about everything, basically. So we cannot ignore this trend. This will be personally my number 2, probably, in the list after sustainability. But we don't have to forget that transparency is something related to give more information to the consumers about our products. It's something linked to the visibility on our supply chain, on the history of the food, on how we work, and all the rest. Trust is something different. Trust is something that you build every day, especially through communication. The trust in your brand, the trust in your company cannot be built just, applying a blockchain or applying some, tool to enhance the transparency into your supply chain. This is a mean, but there are a lot of others. And I think communication is the key. You have to communicate consistently, communicate a lot using social media, addressing the consumers as much more directly as you can to build this trust. That will be reinforced by tools like blockchain, end-to-end traceability, or whatever you would like to implement. Okay, but be aware that to put in place programs that on the paper enhance traceability, but then are flawed, might be an incredible boomerang for a company. Because if you say that you are transparent and you get caught in doing something wrong or not applying your principle, your image will be seriously damaged. All your efforts in communication will be wasted. Okay, so please stay away of fake transparency or fake, let's say, trust enhancing programs and certifications, because it's very easy to put in place a certification schemes and then don't see what's going on, don't check. But if you get caught in a scandal, well, this will be a disaster for any well-known brand. And speaking of transparency and trust, we can speak together, of course, with blockchain and digitalization. Blockchain is, to a certain extent, linked to this transparency trend. What's moving on in the blockchain area? I see more and more use cases around, and that's positive because we have something tangible to work on. The tool might be something useful, of course, to reinforce the traceability and prevent, at least at the supply chain level, or make the life more difficult to process, to prevent fraud to a certain extent, but it's not the silver bullet that will solve all the problems. But the use cases that I see are encouraging. Still, we have some problems, I think, in applying a blockchain on very complex supply chains to a lot of ingredients altogether because of the limitation of the technology, the cost of the technology, the energy consumption. And so I'm not sure we are ready today to apply, blockchain, to a huge supply chain or to all the products of a giant, I don't know, like Nestle or Coca-Cola, just, to imagine the size and the complexity that they might have. But maybe someone in the blockchain field can add a comment and tell me otherwise. Okay, I'm not sure of that. Another limitation that I still see for blockchain is the lack of interoperability of certain systems. We spoke about interoperability for many, many years now, but still I see a lot of different initiatives popping up about blockchain, and some of them clearly will not speak with other systems. So I ask myself, and I keep asking myself, I have no answer, how those systems might gain traction, might get massive adoption, might become mainstream if my traceability system or my blockchain is not speaking with yours. So we have to find, a common ground under which all the systems are speaking with each other. Otherwise, most of the efforts at a certain point, I think, will be wasted. And then blockchain is still suffering, I think, of a lack of regulation. In US, the FDA is pushing a lot toward the adoption of solutions like, blockchain. I'm sure you read a lot of articles and statements by Frank Yanas and all the rest, and that's positive. But still, we have no piece of legislation that I know of, at least not in Italy or in Europe. There were proposals that give a legal value to a data that is protected by blockchain. Clearly, data under blockchain can be trusted more than a data on a paper registry that can be forged in 5 minutes. That's clear to me. But still, we don't have any legal recognition of a data that is protected by blockchain. Once we have those kind of legal initiative, I think that we will see a boost in the blockchain application, because once will be recognized, and there are proposals for this, that a data protected by a blockchain system can be used as a legal proof in a proceeding, administrative or in a court, or have some sort of legal value, act as a certificate data. I'm sure the adoption will scale quickly. But digitalization is not just about blockchain. There are hundreds of tools that are applied today by food companies. We are starting to see application of artificial intelligence, both on the production lines, on the machines that are dealing with food production, but also in softwares that can manage documents, check documents, and potentially in this year, we might see also something about labeling. We are speaking with a great company to do a trial and try to apply the artificial intelligence to the label checks, for instance, to assess the compliance of a label. For sure, the AI, as it is today, cannot do all the work of a lawyer, luckily, so we still have a job next year, but might be of help. And that's the spirit of digitalization. The food sector is not so developed, not so digitalized like others. So the investments in the digitalization can make the process much more efficient. We work with clients for which we validate hundreds of labels per year, and trust me, the amount of time that we spend on those labels, if there is a software behind that is managing, all the changes, all the comments, all the phases of the approval of an artwork, compared to the time that we spend on doing label checks in the traditional way, is incredible. The difference is totally different. We save, I would say, at least 40% of the time, probably much more. So digitalization is a much broader, topic, and I think digitalization will change our industry, because still I see a lot of inefficiencies that with the right investment in technologies might be eliminated. Then the third topic that is at the same level of preference is plant-based. Plant-based is for sure a trend. We have a huge consumer demand. It's not going away. It doesn't matter if the companies doing traditional meat or fish are doing as is normal, because it's normal. Some lobby, the trend will not go away. Okay, so we are seeing clearly a fight between some of those companies investing heavily in plant-based food versus the traditional, meat producers or animal products, let's say, producers. But I think that the trend will not go anywhere, okay? So they have to find a way to live together on the market. We see a huge investments in plant-based, especially in US and in Asia as well, in the main hubs of innovation, and where we have more venture capitalists than in places like Italy. The investments are huge. So I don't think that those companies will just cease to push on the adoption of plant-based food, because we see a contrarian lobby. And why this trend is not going away? Not just because consumer preferences are changing. They realize that a varied diet is better. So probably a lot of people like me are not exactly vegetarian or vegan, are as I could say, flexitarians. So they open to eat a bit of everything, and things will keep this way, I think. But the trend is also linked to sustainability. This is an argument that has been criticized by other companies. So from one side, plant-based food is seen as something that is just for the environment, just for you, is sustainable, is good. To which extent those statements are true, that's a good question, because it's, of course, if you produce plant-based food, you are not exploiting animals that in certain cases, not in all the cases, of course, are not treated very well in the stables and in the farming facilities. But if you are saving resources compared to the traditional methods of production of animal origin food on one side, on the other side again, have we ever checked the overall impact of producing plant-based food? There are data, reliable data, that compares the total cost in terms of resources of producing a plant-based burger and traditional burgers. Some of them probably are there, but still I cannot exactly understand if those statements that plant-based food is necessarily better for the environment, better from a sustainability perspective or not. So I would like to investigate this topic in the future, keeping my mind open, and don't indulging in any of the two sides of the discussion. But this clash, this lobby pro or against, the plant-based food is creating a lot of regulatory uncertainties, because there is a lot of pressure to regulate those foods. And the situation is unclear in many, many countries. So for sure, if you market plant-based food, you might have some headache about how to name it and how to market it in some countries. For instance, in Europe, that the Court of Justice with the Tofu Town case basically prohibited the use of terms like milk or yogurt that are regulated by our European regulations for plant-based food. But there are proposals today on the table of the European Parliament to do even more and prohibit terms like creamy or cheesy and so on plant-based alternatives. So we have a very close position about dairy alternatives to dairy, because the Court of Justice say you cannot use those names, and you cannot use those names even with a qualifier. So you cannot say vegan yogurt or vegan butter. It's not enough if you add the statement that is vegan, because maybe you are not misleading for the consumers, but still you are using a term that is regulated, and you are not respecting the conditions for the use of this term. So very, very close position that is strictly legal, has nothing to do, in my opinion, with misleading consumers, because clearly if you write vegan milk or vegan butter, you have nothing to spare with a normal food. On the other side of the ocean, in Canada, in US, I saw cases where courts or authorities, on the contrary, accepted the legitimacy of such terms if accompanied by an adjective like vegan or, I don't know, soy butter instead of regular butter. Also, if also in those countries, butter or milk have standards of identity, so they have basically a regulation that disciplines the name. So a lot of regulatory uncertainty is a situation that has to be monitored, because many countries are putting on the table proposals, public consultations, not just about the naming, but also about the composition of those foods, because another topic linked to plant-based and another argument for discussion between the two opposite sides is, but plant-based is as nutrition as the animal origin counterpart or not? Can the consumers be misled from a nutritional perspective, so they buy a patty that is made from vegetable, thinking to assume the same amount of protein and nutrients of the animal origin product? Well, that's a topic that is difficult to define because it depends from the consumers. I would say that I would not mislead, but I'm quite a technical, guy. I'm into the sector. I'm very well informed about nutrition. There might be the case where people with poor education about food and maybe also not a lot of choice when it comes to do the grocery in their area might be misled. Okay, so some countries are also proposing fortification policies, minimum composition requirements for plant-based alternatives. And then it will be interesting to monitor because this will have a huge impact, of course, on the companies producing those food, because if they have to meet certain compositional standards, certain minimum amount of proteins, let's say, the situation will be much more complex than if you have to deal just with the naming of the food. Okay, that is just labeling. So once you find the right food, the right name, sorry, from a marketing perspective and from a legal perspective, you are okay. But if you have strict limits in terms of composition, this will become more complex. Then first place in our 2021 survey, it's occupied by the local food. So it seems that the trend about local, it's the winner this year. And I'm a bit surprised because I think it's a bit overrated, this trend. Of course, we have a huge demand of local products by the consumers. This might have boosted a bit also by COVID-19, because in the countries more affected by the lockdown, most of the people are inclined to help the domestic industry and the domestic producers and the small companies acquiring local food. And that's absolutely great, amazing, and right, probably the right thing to do. But still, I think is a bit overrated. Why? Because if I were an entrepreneur and I would like to invest, in local products, in niche that in lines of products that are defined by the country of origin and the adjective of local. First of all, I will find no definition in the law of what is local. So what's local? It's something that has been produced with raw materials coming from 50 kilometers from here, 100, 200, 1,000. Well, no idea. So this could be a first limitation. If we imagine to scale up, of course, our production, if we are a small player in a very specific geographical area and we are already producing with local ingredients, well, we are super happy to see this trend on top, and that's it. But if you want to scale up and build a strong company with big numbers, building on this trend, this will be very difficult. The first reason is the lack of the definition. The second reason is that if you want to grant a specific origin or provenance, or that the food is local, you have to control a lot your supply chain and your suppliers, because otherwise the chance to get caught in a fraud, in a scandal, is high. Okay, it's costly to guarantee a supply chain that is entirely local and raw materials that are always of the same origin or provenance, and especially if you want to supply yourself in a small territory. So this is costly, and this might be risky as well, because if you get tested and for some reason can be demonstrated that the food is not local or is not coming from the origin that is declared on the pack, of course you will have huge backlashes from a media perspective and for your brand. And then once you grow, you have to face also a strange dichotomy, because we all know the motto, think global and act local. Okay, you can say it in different ways, in different languages, but we all know this. But if you want to promote local, products, local brand, but you want to scale them, immediately you get perceived as the bad guy. You start to be criticized because you are, let's say, changing the true nature of the local food to make it standardized and global. And that's a strange behavior, I think, from the consumers, because we all would like to have a huge choice between products, to have available amazing products from all the places in the world. Okay, we all like today to have strawberries or tomatoes not in the right season. We all like to find on the shelves of the supermarket Mexican food or Asian food. But sometimes when it comes to local food, the major brands that invest in those in this trend, and let's say acquire a very well-known local brand, are criticized because immediately there is the impression that they want to change everything. For instance, a couple of companies here in my area have been acquired recently by huge big corporation. Okay, let's imagine the usual name like Coca-Cola, Nestle, Unilever, and so on. And immediately on the press, they were criticized because it has been said, oh, they will change completely the recipe, the nature of the products. They will make this product as another of their own that is standardized, is globalized, and blah, 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 blah. But I think that's quite absurd, because if you are Coca-Cola or Unilever and you buy a small local brand with an excellent reputation, you probably are looking to to get other market shares with different products, and you'll keep them exactly like they are. You'll keep the original recipe, you keep the original specific features of the product, those products. Otherwise, there's no point in acquiring a well-known brand or product that is local and try to scale it up. So I think it's quite strange, this dichotomy, but it's something very difficult to fight with once you are in those situations. So I think it's a bit overrated, but that's it is. It's at the first place. So local is the winner for 2021, but I will have a look to sustainability, to plant-based, to transparency, of course, and to indoor farming, because I think they will be on the race next year. So I don't see any comment to address now. I saw some scrolling down the chat during this brief session, but now nothing more. So thank you for being with me. Please subscribe to our channel. If you lose part of this discussion, you can review it later on, and see you next live. Bye-bye.